Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Hamilton County Board of County Commissioners staff meeting of February the 6th. Good afternoon, Madam Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
We have before us a few items, not a lot of items, but very important items that we need to discuss today. Before we get started, I'd like to mention that this is February 2nd, as I said, but yesterday began the designated month for Black History Month. And so we are, as a commission, going to acknowledge some heroes on February the 11th that have done some great things in our community and outside our community. So we will be doing that on February the 11th. Our first item on the agenda is update of COVID-19 cases, vaccine distribution, and school vaccine rollout. Hamilton County Commissioner Greg Kesterman, how are you?
Very good. Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Good afternoon.
Well, thank you for having me today. I did prepare a few slides to hopefully make this conversation go smoother, but feel free at any time to interrupt me. I'm happy to take questions. If you could just confirm you could see my screen before I flip to the next slide.
Yes, we can.
All right, so right now in Hamilton County, we are up to 67,000 cases of COVID-19, of which nearly 58,000 have presumed recovered. So that leaves about 9,400 cases of active COVID within our community. This is a very large number, so people are still encouraged to be careful when they're out and about traveling and running errands and doing things. Life cannot quite yet get back to normal, but I think things are trending in the right direction. And what I mean by that is when you look at our case numbers, we are starting to see the mountain. We're starting to head down the mountain. On December 10th, we were about 716 cases per day. And this week, our average is about 354 cases per day. So very good trend. It's very hopeful that we're starting to see some of this activity slow down. And it is mirroring what we are seeing at the state level too. When you look at our county's reproductive numbers, since we are now below 1, we are starting to see things contract and shrink, which is a good thing. Today's reproductive number is 0.89. And for the 14 county region, we are at 0.92. In addition to the cases coming down, we're also starting to see hospitalizations come down. Here's Hamilton County's hospitalizations. We are around 2 or 3 hospital admissions per day for our county. This includes Cincinnati, Norwood, Springdale, and all of Hamilton County. When you look at the region's hospitalizations, for several months, we were at 750 to 800 people in our hospitals. And I am so happy to finally see some relief to our hospital systems. We are around 560 patients within our hospital systems today. The same thing is happening with our intensive care unit admissions. We are seeing those numbers drop as well. For a long time, we were around 200 people in our intensive care units, and we are now closer to 115. So all are very positive signs that we are starting to see some calming down of COVID within our community. I always share this with caution though, because I think sometimes good news makes people feel like they can relax. And now is not the time to relax. We need to keep our guard up and make sure that we can get enough of our population vaccinated before we can call COVID done here in Hamilton County. So over the last few weeks, I've had several conversations about our county transitioning to purple. As you know, last Thursday, we did transition back to red, which is a great thing. The one metric that is going to prevent us from going down to orange is this metric right here, which deals with new cases per capita. For us to transition to orange, that number needs to be below 100. Today, we are at 695. So we're a long ways off, and that's really indicative of a lot of COVID within our community. But as some of these other numbers start to calm down, maybe we can be hopeful that this will transition us back to orange in the coming weeks. The other 2 metrics that are currently flagged deal with the number of people in our nursing homes versus the general population. More people are sick out in public than there are in our nursing homes. That's metric 3. And then lastly, overall intensive care unit occupancy is currently flagged as well. The occupancy is above 80% in our intensive care units, as well as the percentage of patients with COVID in our intensive care units exceeds 20% for the reporting period. So let's move on then to talk vaccines. So all kinds of good news. I'm very hopeful that vaccine will start to see some change here within our community. The the big news today is our team is working on vaccinating everyone that is 70 years and older. And then beginning next week, we'll start to work on schools. I often have to remind folks, though, that just because we're working on those individuals that are 70 years and older, we are continuing to provide vaccine to 75, 80-year-old and older. You know, we have not forgotten those other age groups, and we will continue to work through them. In addition, we know in Hamilton County, there are a lot of medical professionals, including doctors and dentists, that are still on the wait list for phase 1A, and we are continuing to provide vaccine to those individuals as well. Last week, I had a lot of questions about Cincinnati Public Schools getting to go first. Ultimately, the decision on which schools go when was made up or was decided by the Ohio Department of Health and the governor's office. I am proud to report, though, that next week, Hamilton County schools will begin to vaccinate all of their teachers, bus drivers, and other essential employees to keep those schools open. So that is very good news. I share a list of providers that will be doing this work in Hamilton County. It includes hospital systems, it includes private pharmacies, several health departments will be chipping in some, as well as a few fire departments will be helping out in this effort. So the goal is for anyone that works in a school to have the opportunity to get vaccinated. In talking with a few administrators and superintendents, I am hearing very high numbers of people wanting the vaccine. I've actually heard as high as 80% of staff wanting the vaccine, which is awesome news. And I think it's critical for getting a large portion of those folks safe and making sure they're able to do their job safely. The other thing I always like to remind folks, you know, everybody who becomes eligible desperately wants to get that vaccine on day one. And the reality with where we're at with vaccine is there's just not enough. And so for those schools that were disappointed that they couldn't go the same time Cincinnati Public went, I like to remind our teachers and our educators that they are the first essential group of employees outside of healthcare professionals that are getting vaccines. So they are in front of police officers, they're in front of the grocery store workers that had to work throughout the pandemic. So I just ask everyone to have some grace and patience as we work to make sure that everyone who is eligible gets their opportunity to be vaccinated. And other good news, looking at the state, as far as how many folks have been vaccinated or received their first vaccination at a state level, about 7.31% have been vaccinated thus far. Here in Hamilton County, we are above the curve. We are at 7.5% of our total population has been vaccinated, so about 61,000 people. And next week, when we start to do schools, we'll get even more vaccine here to get that large job done. And so we would expect to see this number go up even further. You often hear me say that when you want to get vaccinated, my team is just a small piece of that puzzle or that solution. My team has successfully vaccinated about 5,800 people, and that's 5,800 of the total 61,000 that I just referenced. So if folks are trying to get vaccinated, I strongly encourage them to visit our website, hcph.org. And all of the providers that get vaccine are found on our website. We're mapping them so you can see where you can go. It is difficult. You do have to click on several links to make sure that you're putting your name in each of the pharmacy groups that have vaccine available. And sometimes that means you have to call back each day, but if you want the best chance, that's how you have to do it. You are able to register on our website, and the doses that we have, we are randomly selecting folks and making sure that they have an opportunity to get vaccinated. But as I just shared, it is just a small portion of the total vaccine. So best chances are by going to each one of these locations. I'd like to also share that if you're not computer savvy, don't have the internet, you can also call 211 as an opportunity to have somebody help you navigate this process. That is all the slides I have prepared, but I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Kesterman. And once again, a very comprehensive report. And I thank you for being available for this meeting. And I know you'll be at the briefing on Wednesday. So thank you so much for all that you do and your staff do. At this time, I'll open it up for Vice President Reed. Questions or comments?
Yes, thank you. Again, also, I join in the compliments to you, Commissioner Kesterman, and being responsive. You and I have done a number of calls and outreach as well, and all that you do with Commissioner Driehaus in the weekly briefings as well. But I think we all can agree that this is complicated and is very, it changes on a daily basis. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, so we have about 30 plus other partners. Who is keeping the data in terms of, certainly after you will have a presentation by the Health Gap, and certainly they've been asking us to help with people of color, African Americans, getting them to want to do this. But we're seeing that we're not able to even service the ones that do want to do this. So how are we, this is a little different than when we had our other issue where everything came through the health department. How are we keeping, I guess, up with the data, since you can go to Kroger's, you can go to CVS or different places? How are you able to kind of keep up with the data on it?
Great question. So all providers in Ohio have to be approved by the Ohio Department of Health. There are currently statewide about 700 providers that are starting to do this work of vaccinating our elderly. That number is closer to 50 here in Hamilton County. Going back to the state, though, once again, there's 700 that are approved statewide. They actually have an additional, I think, up to 2,700 providers that have been approved. So at some point, they're going to open it up and allow even more pharmacies and primary care physicians to vaccinate. Here in Hamilton County, I receive a list from the state of who the providers are. And so that list is what we're using to make sure that our website is up to date. Once Walgreens and CVS received some vaccine, we added them to our website so that the public would know that they have the opportunity to get vaccinated from those additional providers. To be a provider in the state of Ohio, you also are making an agreement with the state that you will upload data to them within 24 hours. So if I give you a vaccine within 24 hours, I'm uploading your demographic information as well as the lot number for the vaccine and making sure that the state database is updated. And then the state compiles that data on their website. So I shared the screenshot showing how much vaccine had happened in Ohio as well as Hamilton County. That came from coronavirus.ohio.gov, and that's updated daily at 2 p.m.
And also, I saw where Fox 19 is doing a special tonight about the vaccines and the different doses. And I do want to say this as a caveat to those who may not understand how our health commission works for the county, because I didn't know until I got here. It's unlike this, when I was at the city, we don't, the county can't come up and say, this is how we want to do it. It's done by the state health board and the governor. And you basically just have to implement what the governor and the state folks say. I think that's important because we get all these calls like, why don't you do it this way? Why don't you do it that way? We don't control that, nor do you. You have to go by what the state is saying. But I saw something where Fox 19 is going to do a thing on the actual vaccine and the dosage. I don't know if you're involved in that, but if you are, what is it? Because we're getting a lot of, obviously there's a lot of misinformation that might be out there. People are just concerned about, what's going on with these shots. Are they working? Are they not working? Is that what they're, are you a part of that tonight?
I know our public information officer did have some communication with them, and I know they received information about our emergency management agency where some vaccine is stored. But I don't have the details in depth, but I would like to share that the vaccines that are currently available, there's two of them. One is Pfizer and one is Moderna. And both vaccines are extremely safe. There's a lot of scientific data to back up the safety standards of these vaccines. And both of them are nearly 95% effective after you get your second dose. In addition, one dose, while we want you to get both doses, one dose does provide some benefit. And so sometimes people are afraid to take two doses or their schedules don't allow. We would still want you to get that single dose, but are really encouraging folks and making it easy for folks to get that second shot so that you can complete your series.
We still, obviously, we need more.
A lot more.
Now we got new people coming in, and I do want to thank all those on the front lines that's been, working. And we have gotten a lot of calls about the police not being able to get access to it. Do you see of any getting more? I know, we've been advocating obviously for more, but is that going to be a problem? Each week we got more people eligible, but we haven't finished the group before that was eligible. How do you, about that?
I have been working really hard to make sure that I let the state know that we want more doses here, but the state is kind of under the same issue that we are. There's just limited vaccine. The month of February, they've kind of talked to health commissioners and shared that it's going to be tough to get more vaccine because in the month of February, they are working around for the next few weeks to vaccinate all of our school employees. And what that means is they're shaving some doses from each county statewide so that they can focus on the counties that they're doing the school employees. But we'll continue to advocate. The other good news is that there's a third vaccine in the trial stages that are being discussed with the FDA for approval. And if we get another vaccine, that will significantly help us with the vaccine availability.
Thank you.
Mhm.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yeah, thanks, Madam President, and thanks, Commissioner Kesterman, for giving us the update today at our meeting. I'll echo the thanks from my colleagues for all the work that you and your team are doing. I know it's been challenging, and you have to be nimble and respond to what the state is asking of you, but I think you've done a tremendous job, and so has your team. One thing I just want to mention, and you talked about how the doses are dependent upon what we get from the state, and the school, the teachers are now being shaved off the top, so that is even more challenging for the expanded eligibility criteria for the folks down here in Hamilton County that become eligible week after week. And so as that number expands, our number of doses does not expand with it. And so it's very challenging. That said, we do have the capacity to do far more than what we are doing today if we were to get the doses. And so I do think it's important to note that not only city health, county health, but also the hospital systems are built to do thousands more doses if we were to get those doses. And so I want to make sure that folks are aware that we're ready to go as soon as we get those doses, whether it's Johnson & Johnson or just more of what we're already getting, we're ready to go. Thanks, Greg.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. And also it's significant to know that Ohio looked at a different strategy as it relates to who gets the vaccine first, whereas Kentucky used another strategy. So we're using our current strategy that the governor set up, and therefore it may look like our numbers are lower, but we have a different strategy than other outlining states. So people need to know that also. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. Our next item on the agenda is community reinvestment area, and we're going to have an overview. Holly is on, Harry Blanton, and Clinton McIntosh. I don't know who's starting.
Yeah. Holly, are you starting?
Good afternoon. Sorry about that. I had a little issue with
okay.
my video button. Good afternoon, commissioners. I would just like to, I think most of you know, our economic development efforts are overseen and administered by HCDC. And many of you know Harry Blanton, who's here today. And I'm not sure if you've all have met Clinton McIntosh, who's with HCDC. Clinton, you came on, what, maybe a year or so ago, I think?
Yeah, a little over a year ago.
So we're happy to have him join our team here. And we just thought it was a good opportunity for HCDC to share with the board what community reinvestment areas are, as well as what the process is and what the board roles are. And so with that, I'll turn that over to our experts here with HCDC. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Appreciate it. And thank you for introducing Clint. And commissioners, thank you for having us here today. We're very happy to give you an overview of the CRA program. Which I forgive me if I use the acronyms, but that stands for Community Investment Area. It's just easier to say than Community Investment Area. So we're thankful to have the opportunity to give you an overview of the program. I'm going to pull up on my screen a presentation, if that's okay. And I will start the process. Okay, can you all see that?
Not yet.
Oh, let me see if I can get back out. Let me close out this again and I apologize for the delay. It was up on my thing, but for some reason it said it wasn't working.
That's okay.
Okay, let me try that again. Can you see that?
Yes, we can see it now. Mhm.
Good. Thank you very much for your patience.
Mhm.
All right. As I said, we're giving you an overview of the community reinvestment area. As HCDC, as your economic development office, there are different tools that the state of Ohio allows for us to use as a county to promote economic development, and the CRA is one of those. Sorry, the screen is in my. Okay, so in the Ohio Revised Code, it states that the community investment area is basically a tool for unincorporated areas through the county or municipalities to promote economic development. We are allowed to set up the boundaries of a CRA, and basically a CRA is established to get investment back into areas that are discouraged. And if you see at the bottom of the page, I highlighted that word discouraged. It's not really highlighted in the Ohio Revised Code, but I wanted to point that out because that is sort of the purpose of the CRA, is that we go into areas where investment has been discouraged, and we can use this tool to try to encourage new investment.
Mhm.
So some of the challenges that help discourage investment in our urban core, as an urban county, we have these issues. The first is what I would call landlocked. I'm sure the Port Authority has talked to you about this, but the county has a lack of really large sites, and so, or green fields, the pristine kind of farmland that you see out in other counties. So we have to parcel together smaller sites sometimes, and this can become expensive for the property owner or the developer because of the fact it has many different property owners that they're dealing with. Sometimes when the property owners get wind of the fact that a developer is buying properties, they increase the price. So that's just one of the challenges we have. We also have older structures that are on some of our sites, so that sometimes developers will have to demolish these sites. We see this very extensively through some of our older retail strips and our retail properties. You see this throughout the county. I'm sure that you're very familiar with some of the struggling retail properties that we have, whether they be retail strips, places like Northgate Mall, the former Jordan's Crossing, even places like Tri-County Mall are now struggling to keep their anchor tenants and some of their other tenants. So the CRA is a tool that possibly can help us with these challenges as well. And I just want to say that because of e-commerce, we've been seeing this happen for decades with the change in our retail landscape, but it's really been accelerated through e-commerce. And I'm sure you're all familiar with that, and you read about it in the papers, that a lot of people are buying things through the internet now. And a lot of our retail stores, what they call brick and mortar stores, are struggling. And we have a lot of vacancies in some of our retail areas. So that's another challenge that we have. The last two are environmental remediation. We have more contamination just because of the historic use of some of our properties that you wouldn't see out in farmland or what they call green fields. And then finally, the cost per acre is another challenge.
Harry, can I
Yes.
ask a question?
Please do.
As relates to the urban challenge, I'm surprised that when you talked about the former Jordan's Crossing, one reason for reinvestment was because of the climate or the environment in that area. I had been told that people thought it was or investors thought it was too violent, too much violence in that area. So when you look at that list of why people don't want to reinvest, I'm surprised that environment or the climate was not mentioned as an item.
Okay, yeah, I think that that's probably a good thing to point out, that in certain areas of an urban county that there are areas that you see disinvestment, and we try to encourage that through these types of tools. So that's a good point.
Okay.
So at the county level, I think I don't think I've pointed out yet, but the Ohio Revised Code allows municipalities to do CRAs on their own. So they are not required to come to the county for approval, but townships are. And so the CRAs that the county and HCDC administer are on behalf of the townships. So we're going to focus in on townships today, but we will talk about the other ones as well. So townships are able to establish a CRA through the county, and HEDC works with them to do the list of things up there. They often will tell us what area they want us to set up the CRA in and establish it in. They often will point out to us the types of development that they want to incentivize. So as you can see on the second bullet point, we can incentivize office, industrial, retail, and residential. And so each township will tell us what they want to incentivize. So a little bit later, I'm going to point out 3 different examples of CRAs, and you'll see that in those different CRAs, they might focus on residential or commercial. It just depends on the township's issues and their different challenges. Also, we help them determine the maximum terms and the abatements as long as they're consistent with state guidelines. And of course, you have the ability to approve those. And then eventually, after the CRA is established, we can grant abatements to qualifying projects. And then annually, we will mention it later, but we review every commercial agreement to make sure that they're in compliance with their agreement. And that is done through the Tax Incentive Review Council. So any questions about that? Okay, this slide shows you all of the different CRAs that have been established in the townships in Hamilton County. So I believe there are 12 different CRAs in 8 different communities. As you can see, they've been set up over many different years. And so the townships came to the county and asked these CRAs to be established to be able to use this tool. Also wanted to point out on the State of Ohio's website, it explains what a CRA is all about. I don't think we need to review that again, but it basically also lists all of the different CRAs that exist throughout the state. And you can see here in the second bullet point that there are 22 different municipalities that have established CRAs throughout Hamilton County. And this is the list of those 22 communities. And as I mentioned before, they do not need county approval. And I thought this would be a good point in the presentation to maybe provide some perspective about the use of the CRA currently in Hamilton County. So if you go to the state's website, there are a list of all the different agreements that exist in every county in the state. In Hamilton County, we have 352 existing commercial CRA agreements. So across the 48 different jurisdictions in Hamilton County, there are 352 projects that received a tax incentive. And I think it's important to point out that of those 352, only 10 projects are currently receiving an abatement in the townships. So only 3% of the existing CRA agreements have been approved by the county and the townships. So I just wanted you to understand that if you're looking at this from a budgeting perspective or an impact on the county budget, we have only approved 3% of the existing CRA agreements in Hamilton County. The vast majority have been approved by the municipalities, and they do not need to come to us for their approval. So I just wanted you to understand that. Also, I think at some point, probably not today, but at some point, if we are going to analyze the impact on the county, we also want to look at what they call tax increment financing. And the auditors have a lot of data on that. And they have told us that the TIF, or the tax increment financing, has a much larger impact on the county than township CRAs. So I just thought I'd provide some perspective on that for you so you have that information. So what we thought we would do, and please jump in anywhere if you have questions. We thought we would go over 3 different CRAs that exist in the townships to show the differences and how they use them. The first one is Columbia Township. It's a residential and a commercial CRA, and we'll give you more details in a second. The second one is the Colerain Township CRA number 3, which is specifically for Northgate Mall. The third one is Sims Township number 2, which is very focused on a commercial retail corridor, but also is a residential CRA. So this is the Columbia Township CRA. This is the map, and as you can see, Columbia Township is what they call an archipelago. It's broken up into small little islands throughout the county, and so they have a unique situation. And Columbia Township asked us to set up a CRA for the whole township. Now they haven't used it that much. I think they only have 2 agreements that they've used it on, but they wanted the ability, if they wanted to use this tool, that it would be available throughout the township. One of their focuses has been on their older housing stock. Much of their housing stock is from the early 1900s to the 1950s. So if we go back, I can show you that, it's the whole township. So all their residential areas are included, and they have the ability to offer it to single family homeowners or any other residential properties. And then they also allow for it to be used in commercial projects as well. Oh, I'm sorry. I did want to go back and show down here on Wooster Pike. There's one project I thought I would highlight that they used it on, just as an example. There was an older retail strip along Wooster Pike called the Promenade or the Promenade. And I think it was back in 2013, around that date, that the property started to have structural issues. The foundation and the structure started to have, I believe, cracks, and some of the tenants were concerned for their safety. And so a developer came in and bought the property. And the reason they asked for the incentive was to help to stabilize the property before they could even invest in it and kind of re-tenant it. So that was the use of the CRA in Columbia Township. The next one that we wanted to point out was the Coleraine CRA number 3. As you can see, this is the Northgate Mall. And this area is just a very small part of the mall property on some parts that were vacant and had been, they had lost their tenants. At this point right here, I think this was a former JCPenney. And then over here, they had something that was in there that went vacant. And so the developer asked for an incentive to reinvest in the property. When the developer bought the property, I believe it was over 50% vacant. And so Coleraine Township was very concerned about the future of the mall. So the developer wanted to bring in a new cinema here, and then some other new shops with entrances facing Coleraine Avenue or Coleraine Road. And so that was the reason for the incentive for that CRA. And then finally, I'm sorry, I probably should have gone to this. This is just some of the details that I was pointing out, the high vacancy rate, and some of the properties had been demolished and they were struggling with the future of the mall. And then finally, the third one is the Sims Township CRA. They primarily wanted to incentivize 2 areas. One is their Montgomery Road corridor. If you're familiar with Sims, there's obviously some very nice areas along Montgomery Road, but they were concerned about a few properties along Montgomery Road. So they asked us to establish this along that corridor. And then also this residential area, they wanted to see some investment up here in the single family homes. So they set this up as both a commercial and a residential CRA. And as I stated, this is just the description of what I just said. And one thing I would point out about this CRA, or at least in Sims Township, one of their major projects was the CRA was used to keep a major employer from leaving the county. If you're familiar with what's called, I believe they have a new name, but they're most recently WorldPay. Before that, they were Fifth Third Processing Solutions. Excuse me. They were a spinoff of Fifth Third Bank, and they had 800 employees at the time, and they were going to create 300 jobs. And we were in competition to keep them in Hamilton County. They were being courted away, and there's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and so that we wanted to keep their 1,100 jobs here in the county. And so Sims Township asked us if we could pass a CRA for that project, and the county approved that as well. So, and I'm wrapping it up here soon. The ORC, the Ohio Revised Code, dictates the maximum terms of benefits that can be offered under the program. And then at the local level, we determine how far we want to go within those parameters, what kind of benefits we want to offer, how long of a term we want to offer to the investors or to the developers or the property owners if it's a residential situation. The maximums are 100% up to 15 years, but on the next slide, I get a little more specific. So you can see that in residential, if you're remodeling a property, you can go up to 100% for 15 years. Doesn't mean you have to go to the maximum. You can go anywhere below that. And residential new construction as well, 100% for 15 years. And then commercial industrial remodeling can do 100% for 15 years. But if it's a new project, a new construction in the commercial industrial aspect, we can only go up to 50% without school board approval. And so if the developer is trying to go above that in a new construction situation, they will have to work with the school board to get their approval. And then we just thought we would point out sort of the process and how HCDC works with all three of the jurisdictions that have approval in this process. So it starts with the community, in this case, the township. And the township, as we said before, they help us determine the boundaries, the types of projects that they want to incentivize, the terms and the benefits. They pass their local legislation and they coordinate with the school district if there's any attempt to go over that 50% in the commercial new construction. We work with the community to develop a petition, and that goes to the state of Ohio and also is approved by you, the commissioners. And it includes a lot of information that the state needs to see to show that there is a discouraged situation, that there is a disinvestment in a certain area. We conduct a housing survey that includes not only housing, but also commercial properties. And we try to document that there are properties that are seeing disinvestment or vacancies or things of that nature that discourages investment. And then we work with them to pass their local legislation. At the county level, we work with you on the local legislation and the petition and help with passing the enabling legislation. And we help you draft that, as well as submit all the documentation in the petition that will be going to the state, and we answer any questions that you have. And then finally, we send that petition up to the state of Ohio, and they officially certify the CRA if it meets all of the requirements. And then they send us back up a certification to us so that we know that we can move forward with projects. This is my last slide. Once we receive the certification of the CRA, we are allowed to grant individual projects a CRA tax abatement. In the commercial project area, we cannot do they cannot start their project until an agreement is approved. So we negotiate that with the company before they can move forward. And as I said before, we can only go up to 50% in a new construction situation unless they get school board approval. As far as residential, we establish in the enabling legislation what the maximums and the terms are. So if a single family homeowner invests in their property, it'll tell in the legislation what kind of abatement that they can get, and they file that after the work is complete. Now, I should point out, if we're talking about something like a multifamily or an apartment complex or a large residential project, above maybe 4 units, those are considered commercial projects. So those must get approval from the county and the township and then the state. We send them to the state so they can document it. And then finally, I mentioned it before, but every commercial agreement is reviewed by the Tax Incentive Review Council to make sure that that they are doing what they agreed to, that they're making the investments that they said, and that they're keeping the property maintained. We are able to reduce the incentive or actually take it away if they do not do that. And that comes before you every year after the Tax Incentive Review Council reviews the agreements. So that's my presentation. Be happy to answer any other questions that you have.
Harry, can I just ask a question? You don't have to go back to the slide, but I noticed when you had the CRA establishment process and the abatement process, what was missing for me, other than the TIRC coming to us annually, were timelines on when that process takes place. And is there a reason why there's no timeline on those establishment processes or the abatement process?
So I'm sorry.
No, you can go back if you'd like. So
there was nothing listed there. Are you still seeing my screen? I'm trying to get out of
yeah, I see your screen for thank you and question.
Okay, here it is.
Yeah.
My bad. Okay, so in answer to your question, the establishment process, the only time frame that is actually in the law is a 60-day review period by the state. Mm-hmm. Other than that, it's whatever the process takes in terms of locally how long it takes us to do it. So we work with the township, we do the housing survey. Sometimes it's quick to do the housing survey. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer depending on how many properties or how big the CRA is. But we do all that work and then we take it to the township. And then once they approve it, it comes to you. And then we send it up to the state and they have 60 days to certify it. So that's the time frame is sort of fluid depending on how much work we have to put into documenting all the information needed by the state.
So it might be helpful for me at least to look at a tentative time frame of how long it normally happens without any exceptions, so that would be
Sure.
helpful for me.
We
Okay.
usually say about 3 to 6 months to establish a CRA.
Okay. Vice President Reese, do you have any questions or comments?
You're muted, Commissioner.
Okay. All right, thanks. No, I was saying this is very helpful. Usually when people hear CRA, the first thing they think is Community Reinvestment Act
Definitely,
from a
I agree.
national level. And this is something totally separate. Am I correct on that?
That's correct. This Community Investment Act is a federal law and the CRA that we're talking about is state law.
Gotcha. Could you go back to the part where we say the urban development challenges? Because I know some people may look at, some of cities that may not have been included. So can you address that?
You want me to go back to the presentation?
Yeah, you don't have to go back to the slide, but maybe you can elaborate on that, because some of the areas that you have pointed out, someone may look at some of these city areas, but you indicated that urban development, there's some challenges there in the urban cores.
Yes, so there's 22 municipalities in Hamilton County that have set up the CRAs. And as far as the challenges, I guess, are you referring to what Commissioner Dumas was saying before about?
Yeah, I just wanted you to elaborate a little bit more on that part. I thought she brought up a great question.
Yes, I think that's a great question. So certain areas are, maybe low income areas, or maybe they have brownfields or other blighting factors. And so developers, it's sometimes hard to get them to invest in those areas. And because of they're investing in an area where they've seen disinvestment. And so the CRA is a good tool to get them over that challenge in order to make it more profitable for them to take that risk, if you may say that. But I hope I'm answering your question. I don't know if there's more that you're specifically asking about.
Well, I was just looking at the areas that we're targeting, and some of them don't seem to be in line with those urban areas, or maybe those were other things that we've been investing in maybe way before I got here. So just wanted to kind of help me understand that.
So the county is only overseeing township CRAs. The municipal CRAs are totally done by, like, the city of Cincinnati does their own CRAs. All the other municipalities within Hamilton County do not have to come back to the county for approval. So they administer those separately from our administration of the township ones. Thank you.
That helps me, because when people hear CRA, and I don't want to call them and say, well, I didn't hear anything about, Cincinnati or Norwood or.
Sure.
So that's what I was trying to get at. And then my last question is the question about the oversight piece you mentioned at the end, clawbacks, if you will. You said, is each deal differently, in terms of when they have to do X, Y, and Z, in terms of if it's producing jobs or what have you? How does the clawback handled who determines before we get it that there has to be a clawback, that they didn't make their commitment? Is each deal different?
So HCDC oversees the Tax Incentive Review Council every year on behalf of the county. And we review each agreement, and we send out a report to the property owner, and we ask them to fill out the information that the state requests. And the state is the ultimate authority here. And they provide us with a form that we send to the property owner, and the property owner fills out that form. If we notice that they are not meeting the goals in their agreement, like, let's say they were supposed to create a number of jobs and they didn't create those jobs, then we will invite them into the Tax Incentive Review Council. The Tax Incentive Review Council is appointed by the county. You appoint 3 commissioner appointees, and then there are appointees by the local community. There are 2 appointees. So in this case, it would be 2 township appointees. And then there's an appointee from the school board as well. And then we bring before the TIRC every agreement and give an update on it. If a company or a property owner is not meeting up to their goals, we invite them in to present to the TIRC. And then the TIRC will deliberate, and they will make a recommendation to you, the county commissioners. And then we will bring all of those recommendations before you for your consideration. You can decide whether you want to reduce the incentive as recommended or claw it back or end it, however you want to deal with it.
Gotcha. And my final question, Harry, do you anticipate due to COVID, I mean, certainly you mentioned the Co-Rain project, and I was very happy to see the theater come there. I love going to the movies, but I know with COVID, you know, all movie theaters have had a hard time and other businesses. So do you anticipate, or is there something that maybe we should be aware of that will work with these? Because, you know, some of them probably won't be able to meet what they thought would be available because of something they did not know was going to happen.
Yeah, the TRC usually takes into account economic conditions or mitigating factors, things that might be an explanation of why something happened and it wasn't necessarily the fault of the property owner. I know that in the case of Northgate, they're even, you know, as you said, some of these opportunities to try to redevelop these properties have sustained these properties for a while, but there's even Northgate's even looking at it. I think there's been articles in the paper that they might have enough to do more to reinvent Northgate to keep on with contemporary retail. The e-commerce situation has really impacted retail. And so they're constantly having to rethink, how do we reinvent these properties? How do we keep them vibrant and vital? So we might hear from them in the future. We don't know.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Thanks, Harry, for the presentation. What is the community engagement process at the township level before these recommendations get to us?
So townships have to approve these in public meetings, and so they do it in public at their township meetings. Each township, their engagement with the community is up to them and how they engage with them. I know that many communities will have committees that discuss these things. I also should point out that before a CRA is established, there is a public notification process that we put in the paper so that everyone is aware of these being established. But it's just like any other kind of tax incentive that the county considers. The public has the right to come to public meetings and have their say and input on these different agreements that are being proposed.
Thank you. My other question is, we have not, from all accounts, done a whole bunch of these because the list just seems relatively small just on the township portion. But I'm wondering, some of these are related to commercial development, some of them are related to residential development, some of it's mixed. I'm wondering, by way of policy for the board, if we should take a look at this as we establish the affordable housing group that is going to be established sometime this year, and figure out whether or not there's a nexus between CRAs on the residential side and affordable housing in the county, and just have that conversation. Harry, I don't know if any previous board, I don't have any recollection of it, but or any previous board has had a policy conversation about CRAs related to affordable housing. Have there been any conversations like that?
No, I'm pretty sure. I've been here 28 years and I don't believe so.
Okay.
So I think that would be a new initiative, but
Mhm.
as it is a valid initiative. The county has the right, since you approve these things, to have certain guidelines if you wish to.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, I just would like to roll that in to the conversation that this other group will be having about affordable
Mhm.
housing in general, and then look to some of the things that the county approves of as economic development tools or incentives, and
Mhm.
make sure that we're hitting the mark
Mhm.
when it comes, especially on this residential side.
Mhm.
Thank you. And I just say that, just put it out there. I know that's something that will happen in the future, but I don't want to lose track of it.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Commissioner Dreehouse, as we, of course, affordable housing is at the top of our list. So we certainly can take a look at that. Thank you. Well, Harry, I want to thank you. And Clinton, did he do okay?
Of course. Of course.
Yeah,
Madam
Clint did a great
President?
job on all of these. So I'm sorry he didn't get to talk, but he's very good at what he does, and we're happy to have him.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. So thank you both for coming.
Madam President,
Yes.
Thank
uh-huh.
you.
if I could just ask a quick question, Harry, I don't want to go too far
Sure.
into the weeds on this, and Harry, the answer could just be no impact whatsoever. But I recall that there were some differences. There was some legislative change maybe a decade or so ago, and then there was a difference between CRAs that were established before a certain date. I think it was maybe 1994, and CRAs established after that. I was just wondering if that dynamic still holds in Hamilton County, or if we are just dealing with one type of CRA and one process. Is there anything we need to know about a different type of CRA that exists in the county at this point, or is that a dynamic that no longer exists?
No, you're right. That is pre-1994 CRAs and post-1994. I'd have to go back. I don't know if you know Clint, but the majority of ours are probably post-1994. Let's see. I've got the physical copy in front of me, so I can tell you actually, because we had the
Yeah,
date.
I couldn't see on the list that you had. I couldn't see it.
Yeah. The other thing, and as you point out, Jeff, pre-1994 CRAs do not have agreements with the commercial property owners. They were just established, and the incentive was just given to whoever was in the CRA and met the eligibility requirements. Excuse me. But post-94, obviously, as I stated, have to have agreements with the commercial property owner. Let's see here. Of our current CRAs, it looks like all of them are post 1994, so they all should follow the same rules.
Okay, and that was my concern, was whether there were some pre-established districts that just by right, someone located in that district, that they would get a benefit. And the board might be wondering, why did that happen? But it sounds like it's not an issue anymore for us. So we're dealing under a consistent set of rules. So that's good.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you both.
Thank you very much, commissioners. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
too.
Here. Bye.
So our next order of business is a discussion with the Health Gaps campaign and their need for vaccination messages that they've been putting out for Black and Brown population in Hamilton County. And we have before us Robert Bell, the Director of Economic Inclusion, and also Renee Mahaffey Harris from the Center for Closing the Health Gap. So you guys can take it away.
Yeah, well, I'll start. Thank you. Thanks for having us. And I just need some help from you. If I freeze up, somebody let me know, and I can just hit a button to get going again. But I want to thank, this is Robert Bell, and I just want to thank the commissioners for having us today. I'm really excited about this. But before I introduce the Closing the Health Gap, I'd like to take a minute to put their work and our department's effort in perspective. Last year, our department's name was changed to the Department of Economic, from the Department of Economic Inclusion to Economic Inclusion and Equity. Hamilton County's support of this work you're about to hear about today is a direct result of that change. Now, Webster describes equity as a justice according to natural law or right, freedom from bias and fairness, and freedom from favoritism. Last year, I participated in several excellent trainings on implementing the equity framework in governmental agencies. These sessions were sponsored by the national organization called GARE, G-A-R-E, which is the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. In general, the equity framework requires strategies that promote fair treatment, equal access, and advancement for all people, while at the same time striving to identify and eliminate potential barriers that may be preventing the full participation of some groups. The equity framework also promotes culturally relevant services, as well as utilization of grassroots or community engagement approaches at the same time. Now, this means having the community and residents, the end recipients of our services, give input into the development of solutions to the problems we're seeking to address. Last year, we first used the equity framework to provide COVID-19 safety equipment to minority, low-income, and vulnerable communities. But to do this, we went directly to vulnerable communities and asked them what they needed in order to combat COVID-19. And with the help of our emergency management and homeland security agencies, these groups received more than 60,000 reusable cloth masks, gloves, and other PPE items that they desperately needed at the time. Now, next, we utilized the framework to provide $630,000 to 83 mostly minority-owned childcare provider businesses who were in danger of losing their business due to high cost of mandated COVID-19 health and safety measures. Again, we worked to find out how best we could help them before we completed putting the program together. And we know now that they were able to remain open today, largely because of Hamilton County's support. The Center for Closing the Health Gap was our next pilot for utilizing the equity framework, which we found that to our delight that they naturally do a lot of it anyway. The goal of this program is to mitigate the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on minority and vulnerable segments of our community. You still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. GARE, which is the governmental Association for Economic Inclusion and Equity, and is a big believer, and so are we in our Economic Inclusion Council, that utilizing the equity framework could be of great benefit to local governments like Hamilton County, chiefly because it begs the question for everyone in our organization to think about this. How can we continue to improve our ability to understand the needs of and provide effective services to all segments of our diverse community? Now think of the impact of that if we had the entire organization thinking in such a focused manner. But so now to tell the story of their equity framework efforts, I'd like to introduce Renee Mahaffey Harris, President and CEO of the Center for Closing the Health Gap. Renee?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I know that many of you have seen the slide deck and, oh my gosh, how is she going to get this done? So tell me how much time I have so that can either accelerate or slow me down.
A reasonable time. How about that?
That's clever.
To include the important information for sure.
Well, first of all, again, what I am reporting to you all on today, if I can get my screen to proceed. You're still sharing with me, right?
Yes.
My arrow is not moving forward. All right. Try it that way. All right. So our objective in this work was to increase the awareness, build knowledge, and expand the capacity to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on marginalized Black and Brown populations in Hamilton County, and excuse some of the typos. Our deliverables are to conduct virtual, qualitative, and quantitative research, develop a dynamic multimedia campaign, hold 2 virtual information sessions, conduct 6 session community support groups, project monitor and tracking, internal and external communication strategies, plus we added a qualitative input from African American physicians. So I'd like first to take you through the results of the quantitative research methodology. We had an opportunity to be able to kind of expand our analysis, our sub-analysis, by including quantitative research work with Xavier University, looking at respondents across the county, representing about 3,000 people of both African-American and white populations, so that we can really be able to measure what we learned against the broader community population context for the county. So I'll read through some of the data. I'm going to have to move my little picture over here so I can see what I'm doing. I will, the data set is primarily representative of the Hamilton County population. As you can see from the quantitative data that you're reviewing, is that we had a higher skew towards with females, and in a higher income and higher education amongst that population. And some of this we attribute to the timing of the execution of this work. We completed all of this work in a matter of 5 weeks, which is highly unusual, but because of the resource that was supporting this work, that was the deadline we had. So we recognize that, and we wanted you to understand that up front in that 3,000 number. the skew is more female, higher income, and higher education relative to the quantitative research. And then again, the sample base size for the Hispanic and Asian populations were about 2%. And that data includes non-Hamilton County residents as well. So as we look at this first graph, again, you'll see what I just described in the disparity of the number of people, and that it is skewing higher income for households, with our median household for Hamilton County being 57,000 people for a household of 4. So moving on to, that baseline data that really helped us be able to understand the data sets you're going to see through the rest of this presentation. Just it level sets you for what the white population looks like across incomes. But I think what's most important is as we look at the COVID-19 death rates, the rates of death are higher by race, mirroring the national data of 2.8 times the white population. So you'll see that in this graph. The experience with COVID-19, again, what we learned is that African American and Hispanics are significantly more likely to have known someone who died from COVID-19, and therefore believe it is a serious threat to our health. So if you look at the last section of this slide, the perceptions align with the previous slide, with African Americans representing over 52%, Hispanic population over 49%, again, experiencing and having ability to say that they know someone who has experienced or died from COVID-19. So the majority of the respondents understood how the virus is spread, its risk and prevention basics, but African American and Hispanics perceive their risk to be lower, right? Meaning that the perceptions, that meaning COVID-19 is a serious threat to their health, was greatest among African American Hispanics. So again, recognizing that that broader population that we are reporting against, African Americans and Hispanics again perceive a greater threat to our health from COVID-19. More than half of our respondents were extremely likely to believe that they could get the vaccine when it becomes, more than half of those survey respondents are extremely likely to get the vaccine when it becomes available. How do I move this? I'm sorry, your photos are like in the way of my slide. And so I don't have this memorized, so I'm trying to move it so that I can see my words. Great, thank you. So more than half of our survey respondents are extremely likely to get the vaccine when it becomes available. As previous data suggested, African American respondents are significantly least likely to get the vaccine when it becomes available. I know that those are kind of two different statements. So we asked the question, are you going to take the vaccine when it was available? And we had a larger percentage of African American, as you can see from this graph, that said they are extremely unlikely to take the vaccine, which mirrors all of the information we are hearing and seeing over the past few days. So as we looked at COVID-19 vaccine perceptions, again, data again continues to confirm that some of the beliefs, I'll just pull out a few, that the vaccine will prevent me from getting COVID-19. That number was 32% for the African American community in comparison to white community being 75% and Hispanic community being 65%. Most respondents overall have a positive perception of the vaccine, although there are significantly greater concerns for African Americans, as noted in the exceptions you see in the data. So as we shift to the vaccine hesitancy and the conversations we are hearing in our country, what this data told us is that the trusted sources vary. So one of the things that we can report is that conclusively, the health departments were a place for information for most of our respondents. And I'll move on to the next slide. As people reported how their lives have been impacted, the economic impact of the pandemic was statistically significantly greatest reported within the African American community. And you'll see that impact per household. You see that African American number being, and I may be saying this wrong. So when asked the question, no, my household is approximately the same size or higher. So if you look at the median income for the county, this slide tells us that people of color had experienced a greater loss in their income during the pandemic over time. So we could go into this data set a little bit more and describe to you what that actually means, but ultimately that's what this slide is telling us. So as we look at racial perspectives, now shifting to the qualitative research. So everything you've seen to date was from the quantitative research. Now you're going to see our methodology and response rates and information gathered from the qualitative research. So we conducted 7 focus groups in the African American community and 2 focus groups in the Hispanic community. And so what this qualitative research again shows us is that the largest percent of the participants were female. You can see that many of those individuals had some college. And then many of the respondents in the Hispanic community did not provide demographic information due to their fears of immigration status and that fear relative to immigration. So our overall learnings from the qualitative data that there are concerns regarding the COVID-19 vaccine safety. Those concerns are around how quickly it was developed. Feel that there's more information needed to feel better about the safety and effectiveness of the vaccine. Third, trust of the medical field and vaccine developers is not a factor for Hispanics and Asians. However, adversely, it was a significant factor for the African American participants in this work. Just 2 of 79 respondents would participate in a clinical trial to validate the safety and efficacy of the COVID-19 vaccine. And educational level does not impact likelihood of getting the vaccine. That's what we learned from the qualitative work. So let's dig a little deeper into the African American community's hesitancy for the vaccine. So some of these high-level statements we want to share from the focus groups, even with the pandemic killing thousands of people, over half of the qualitative respondents said that they would never get the COVID vaccine. This is more exaggerated than the survey data, than the quantitative survey data. And just 8 of the African American respondents in the focus groups said that they were willing to take the vaccine if it were available to them. So digging a little deeper into vaccine hesitancy, some of the respondents noted that the difference between anti-vaccine stance versus their COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy in some ways aligned with the simple recognition of that there are various vaccines. So they understood that there have been other vaccines that we have all taken. However, the years of racial discrimination and experimentation without consent and ignoring the specific needs of African Americans led to mistrust in the healthcare and governmental systems. So one of the statements says, if you track your history, your antenna should go up. And so that is really a significant thing to remember, because it's that generational knowledge that passes along from generation to generation. Again, we've heard the comments and data shared from many sources across the country that respondents cited government-led test experiments like Tuskegee that used African Americans unwillingly. The lack of trust explained a little further. So, we look at the legacy continues for many of these respondents, looking at previous research, even recent research studies, even in the 70s, that trust has been impossible to build, with many being underserved, feeling disconnected and not listened to and or dismissed by medical professionals. And again, we did other focus groups about a year or so ago with women, about 110 women, and that was a similar feeling, just that not full trust of the medical field. Again, as you look at the African American percentages on a number of these questions, I think I just want to state, and you can look at the data yourselves, but African Americans are twice as concerned about a bad reaction to the vaccine compared to the total sample. So again, that is a part of the hesitancy. So as we look at COVID-19 vaccine concerns, respondents continue to state that the COVID-19 vaccine has been too politically charged. These respondents also feel that there's a justifiable wariness of the vaccine in particular, and people question if it will be distributed equitably and fair to all communities. A few also expressed concerns that the vaccine's reaction with other, concerns around whether or not there'd be any interaction negatively with other medications they are already taking. So again, further information about the risk perception. African Americans and Hispanics are significantly less likely to believe they're at risk of contracting the virus. Many reported that is due to the belief that they're taking necessary precautions. So again, that's a perception from the qualitative research. Again, we can dig further into that later with questions. So again, as we look at vaccine concerns, all all of the respondents voiced some concerns about how quickly it was developed. A few expressed concerns about the vaccine's reactions with other medications. And some of the quotes I'd just like to leave with you: if I saw certain people I knew and respected in the community taking the shot and recommending that, I would do so. I think I'd consider it. And then I want to be a part of the solution in getting this virus under control. So while there are those perceptions and concerns, there still is a desire to gain more information to really stop the spread of COVID-19. And again, as the survey data indicated, trusted sources are few and well below the average. Respondents trust information from the health department as well as the health gap because there has been a proven time frame of trust built. Unlike the quantitative data, the vast majority of the interviewed respondents would trust their personal doctor who they believe knows them well. On the other hand, most don't believe these doctors individually have all the answers, and they are looking for related to the vaccine. And so again, if my doctor recommends, I will take it. I trust him, but they still question whether or not the doctors maybe have all of the information. But that is another trusted source. So the health department, friends and family, and their personal doctors still ranked high around the qualitative data. So the African American doctor's role. Many respondents think that the African American doctor should work with trusted community organizations and leaders to help develop credibility in the information. People want someone to lead them through this pandemic, someone on the ground who knows the community and is trusted. And so let's talk a little bit more about that. So one of the questions asked and one of the responses was, where do the faith leaders fit in this conversation? So people felt overwhelmingly that they absolutely trust their faith leaders. While most respondents have their faith in their pastors, they would not necessarily look to the church leaders for accurate information about the vaccine. However, they do believe that the power of faith of our Black ministers is still there, and that the church itself, that physical structure, is a place they feel safe. Many of them felt that the reason for, maybe not seeing the leader as the voice is that they feel that the pastors and church leaders are in the same boat as us, as relying on information they receive or hear. And again, though, it was important to note that the physical structures of the faith institutions throughout our county could be a place where people feel safest in actually receiving the vaccine. So let's turn to the Hispanic perceptions. Hispanics are willing to get the vaccine soon. While many Hispanics had questions they wanted answered about the vaccine, most are confident that they will eventually get the vaccine. So that is a stark difference from the African American community. Again, those vaccine concerns were more about the results of the symptoms related to the vaccine. Hispanics are significantly less likely to consider themselves at risk for getting the COVID-19 vaccine, although they recognize their community is at higher risk. Again, further concerns about the vaccine has become, the concern around the politically charged conversations, and I think that is tremendously lessening. And so again, the information from the health departments and other trusted sources are definitely giving people more information to inform their decision. One of the final things we wanted to share was a 8 participant of African Americans representing a subset of African American physicians in our community. I thought it was important to share that the questions around the process, the vaccine itself. About a third see COVID-19 patients regularly. This is kind of an assessment of these Black physicians. All think people are not taking COVID-19 as seriously as they could. 5 of 8 were extremely and very confident in the vaccine. All would recommend the vaccine to patients and friends, but are not guaranteed to recommend it completely. All are likely to personally get the vaccine, but 6 of the 8 were very likely to get it. And there are, again, still some small percentage of physicians who want more information. So again, back to issues related to the COVID-19 vaccine among marginalized populations, and according to specifically the medical professionals. So when people ask the question, why was there and why is there a disproportionate impact of COVID-19 upon Black and Brown people? So some of the responses were poor health status of people of color, the social determinants of health, which result in delayed care or poor access to health care, mistrust of the healthcare system in minority and marginalized communities, specific to implicit bias and racism in healthcare providers, really built more in the bias that may not have been really completely understood in their educational process in medical school. And overall, there's a fear and distrust of the medical community experimenting on people. So again, issues related among marginalized populations, according to African American medical professionals, distrust due to previous vaccine malicious testing by the US government. And there's also a mistrust for patients even over the flu vaccine. Sometimes placing something considered unnatural in the body is a big factor. And so again, as we think about the hesitancy, there are some historic references that cause a lot of that hesitancy. In addition to some of the comment patient COVID-19 vaccine myths. So some of these are statements reported to medical professionals. Some of it was about the politicizing. They don't want anything to do with anything experimental. The vaccination caused one to develop the virus infection. At least that was a perception reported to a physician. African Americans are being used as guinea pigs. It's too rushed. And again, some of the conspiracy conversations on social media, again, back to the statement, Black people being asked to be guinea pigs because of some of the historic references that are in our history. We also conducted mental health support groups because what we wanted to understand in mitigating the risk, we wanted to understand what have been the mental health impacts to the Black and Brown communities in particular. So we conducted support groups across Hamilton County where we were able to help manage the increased stress and anxiety due to it was a 4-week program that we introduced and executed with 5 support groups across the county. 3 of those were African American female groups and 2 were Hispanic groups with a mixture of Guatemalan, Mexican, and then Salvador participants that were both male and female. So some of the things that we learned from the support groups from the pre and post test, that 50% of the participants said that COVID-19 had an impact on their mental and emotional well-being. 25% stated that racial and political impacts in conversations had an impact on their mental and emotional well-being, that 25% of them felt sadness as a result of COVID-19, loneliness. I've dropped down to 50% of them said that the knowledge of self-care methods was something that they needed more of, as well as awareness of healthy coping skills. So what they learned from the support groups, that what our intent was to understand where their emotional, whether or not there's been an impact on their emotional well-being, and then what they could receive to help mitigate that. And so I think the direction for what we need to do is quite clear. We need more tools around self-care and more awareness on healthy coping skills. So again, from the support groups, responses from the 5 support groups that we conducted, COVID-19 anxiety scale showed over 65%, and then the perceived stress survey about 40%. So again, we know that there is an impact to one's stress level, and we also know that people understand what information they need that could help improve their anxiety level and stress that's impacting themselves and their families. So again, a number of other comments, and I know I'm running out of time, but I think it's important to see that the participants, everything I like learning about new topics and getting together with other women, this is what they learned from the support groups or what they gained. They also gained interacting with the group and that information being shared, help them have more tools, equip them with more tools to be able to manage the stress and impacts of the anxiety and stress related to COVID-19. So let's switch to the campaign. So the campaign that we launched was informed by early top line results from our data and our quantitative and qualitative data. Now that we've been able to analyze all the report, we do have recommendation on ways in which we could enhance the campaign so that we can drive more information, as well as help people continue to know what they need to continue to do for us to protect each other during this pandemic. And so We Must Save Us is the campaign. It directs people to the COVID-19 communityresources.com site that was launched on March 23rd of 2020 in response to COVID-19. We immediately began to work with many of our organizations that work within the Black community, in particular, the African American Chamber, the Urban League of Greater Cincinnati, the NAACP, the Cincinnati Medical Association, and one of our local council members, Jan Michelle Kearney. We launched the site, and the site has enabled us to conduct over 28 town halls that have resulted in, I don't want to jump ahead of myself, those town halls have resulted in a great deal of new information. But this campaign, even in a short run, we were able to reach over 8,000 visitors impact over 8,000 visitors to the COVID-19 site. And those page views actually increased, so that the number of people coming to the site from December to December 31st, and then from December 1st to January 20th, reached a total of 11,000 people coming to that COVID site from the campaign that we've been able to begin. Those page views, meaning that people are going to the places where there's information about the vaccine and about COVID testing and about what they can do in their households for themselves to mitigate the risks. Again, there have been a number of articles on again, addressing the vaccine hesitancy, which the COVID-19 communityresources.com site has enabled us to share those town halls where there can be questions asked and information to correct many of the myths and misfacts that are being distributed throughout our community. The billboards, again, drive people to COVID-19 communityresources.com, and we know that by the increased number of views and the increased number of page views. We also know that the impact of the campaign was increased knowledge. And so if you see that spike in December, that was when the commercials ran. And so as a result of the commercials and radio and billboards combined, we saw a significant increase in knowledge being disseminated through that COVID site. So some of the recommendations, and I think this is really important because this is kind of where we go next. We need to create full transparency and communication collateral that details the vaccine's development, side effects, risk, and unknowns. And so those are many of the questions that are posed on the town halls and have also been posed in our portal of the COVID site. Also, we need to continue to quantitatively track perceptions and attitudes and determine how messaging is resonating and whether it's effective and what we need to tweak. Communicate the cost and accessibility of COVID-19, as well as the accessibility to the vaccine. And we must continue the community support groups, given their effectiveness. So these are some of the recommendations. So recommendations from respondents. They would like to know more information about the vaccine. They want to know about the possible side effects and distribution plans for the vaccine. They want more information that is tailored to the African American and Hispanic groups. They want to see shared statistics, number of impact, number of mortality. They want to educate the young people so that they can draw the parents' involvement through young people. They want to have more bilingual information shared. They want to ensure that the community has free access to the vaccines and that there is no accessibility nor cost barriers. And they want to be provided different options regarding testing and vaccination. Some are afraid to seek for help because they fear that, and this is within the Hispanic community, they fear that if they ask questions that has some correlation back to immigration. And so we must make sure that information is provided in a safe and accessible way. Again, they want to see more seminars with patients and doctors, more mental health and emotional support, support and assistance related to remote learning for their students without internet. They want to know how to navigate through the immigration concerns and where they can find different places to take care of their uninsured needs for their health concerns that may fall outside of COVID-19. again, want to continue to spread information through shelters, agencies, churches, anywhere that people are already. So meeting people where they are is really the key message here, that oftentimes messages are delivered, but people want to be met where they are and have that information be able to respond to them where they are. So none of this work would have been possible without over 60 organizations who help recruit the critical participants, as well as our HealthGap team, as well as our partner with Xavier University and this broader quantitative data that helped us be able to measure the impacts of this research to the broader majority community. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a quick view of the results of this 5-week research project. So thank you.
You're muted, Commissioner. You're muted.
Thank you. So I'm going to start over because it's worth saying. Such a compelling and comprehensive report, considering the amount of time also that you had to do all this great work that you did. And so I certainly appreciate it. We know as we look at the statistics, the disparity is evident for all the reasons that you brought up in the report. And so we say, how do we get beyond that? Well, you indicated all the messaging, and I like the diversity of messaging that you have done. And it's just, we have to meet them, as you say, where they are. And so I just thought it was just a great report. And also your recommendations were so vast that we need to make sure that we do some of those things, if not all those things, to bring people into the forefront so they can start trusting, and trusting takes time. So I'm going to open it up to my fellow commissioners, Vice President Reese.
Yes, thank you. I would like to echo that, and so excited. Those who know me, I'm a marketing consultant. So when I see all this research and data and messaging, I really get excited about it. Let me, I want to make sure we're in good context in what we received in terms of what you and the HealthGap were able to do in a short period of time. Now this was done, what was the budget on this?
It was 120,000.
Okay, and so this is with 120,000 in a short amount of time, you're able to get to the community, get us feedback, get us data. That's great. I know we just voted on, I think, $250,000 last week, and that'll go into now phase of 2021 as we move forward. Am I correct, Renee?
No, I think that is actually, I don't mean to say no, but I think that is actually a project that was supported over a year ago, and because of COVID-19 was delayed. It was a caregiver project. You know, obviously there's some complements, but that is a different initiative to really provide more tools and resources to as the data has shown. This is prior to COVID-19 that we were seeing an alarming rates nationally of people dying sooner than the people they're caring for. And so I think actually maybe I'm looking at Commissioner Driehaus, maybe this is a 3-year, it was maybe 3 years ago. I feel like it took some time, and we were
are you talking about the Care for the Caregiver?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a initiative that we did through a levy. And so it was the first time we've done that, and we were trying to provide resources for caregivers because we knew that they were extremely important to the communities that were vulnerable.
Gotcha.
And that was a couple of years ago. So that was a separate.
Oh yeah, that was like 3 or 4 years. It was 3 years.
Yes, it's
yeah.
Wow. Talk about a fast pace. But with this, so we got all this great information. We got this data. We still have issues. I mean, COVID is still here. People are still affected. We've got vaccine that's here. You've done some great work in here. I just wanted to make sure that this didn't stop as we got the data, what's the problem, what we need, and kind of, you know, what those next steps are. So that's what I wanted to just make sure we didn't stop at that. In your data, one of the things that came out is this issue about the vaccine. And I think you gave, based on the data, a very accurate account of what many of us have been hearing that is in the community, and concerns, real concerns. People want to know, especially after what happened with Hank Aaron. That was a big, a hurdle for a lot of African Americans. Say, I told you so. And they are really pushing us to make sure that people of color, African Americans, will get the vaccine. But you sit on the state committee with the governor, and I know you have been fighting very hard. But when you look at the numbers, we have vaccine, and we do have a lot of African Americans who do want to get the vaccine.
Right.
Do we have a way of seeing what those numbers are? How many African Americans? I just saw the Black Caucus Foundation came out today and challenging the governor about getting the vaccine to the people who are. We're focusing on getting people to do it, but it's a lot of people that want to do it, and we don't have the vaccine or the data showing that we actually were able to get the ones that's already in line. Can you maybe talk about that?
Well, I can speak to the fact that from the strike force that the governor appointed for COVID-19, one of the recommendations in the blueprint document was that the state be able to develop a system that all race and ethnicity data can be shared to ODH in a consistent fashion. And so that is probably what the caucus heard from ODH as to why they don't have 100% data, is that there is not a consistent system across all of the 88 municipality or counties and how that race and ethnicity data is collected. And so I know that is something they're working on, but I do think that because that's not a requirement in the collection of data, I know that both the county and city have done a great job of getting as much data that they can without that state mandate for the collection of that data. And so I know that that's something they're working on. So I guess that's the answer to the question, why there isn't more data. Also, there hasn't been a significant enough, I know that Greg Kesterman reported the percent of vaccine that's been disseminated here, but when you look at our amount of vaccine for the state of Ohio versus other states, not as many people have a vaccine in the arm in the state of Ohio. One of the things that we've identified from the work group that the governor's appointed is that communication is one of the critical barriers. And so we have been asked, the Health Hub has been asked to create a toolkit that would serve, and many of our health systems are creating toolkits for their individual patients, but this toolkit is designed, and it is informed by a lot of the work that we've done here for the Hamilton County project, to include videos that really help people navigate the processes and the information from experts, as well as it's electronic, so that we can update the FAQ, so that we can keep responding to those questions and queries that are coming forth in social media and give some factual answers from other experts, as well as kind of a roadmap on how to put together a community meeting. It could be a town hall, it could be a community meeting, it could be some way to have that toolkit work with, at this point, it's being rolled out through the NAACP chapters across the state, but also being available to any organization to take the toolkit and bring together a group of 10 to 15 people and utilize that toolkit to provide information. Because as you saw in the report, there's, people want ways to make sure they can get accurate information. And so the only way we felt we could scale it is to create a kind of a prototype that has the basic information and that we could manage updating it with ODH, with new data, as well as how to apply and where you can sign up for the vaccine, where you can actually get the vaccine, and linking people back to the COVID site at the state level as well, linking to ODH site, so that there's a way that people have a consistency in getting information and know where that information is informed from.
I want to say it's also, I like how you had all of these organizations connected, and certainly that toolkit will be helpful as a follow-up for them as well, by you already having them at the pipeline. I do like the fact that you also talked about the cost of healthcare. We don't talk about that a lot, but people come out of the hospital, thank God, those who do beat COVID, but are in there, weeks and months, and now, COVID didn't get you. but the bill might get you. And that's one of the reasons we're saying we got to attack it on both ends. Could you talk about that? Because a lot of people may be ended up filing bankruptcy because they just don't have the money. And you
So,
put their money was a big issue as well.
So I think what we were able to report is people describing that there have had an impact of COVID because of COVID-19, either job lost or inability to maintain their economics in a way to manage their household. So people who maybe previously may not have been impacted are now being impacted by COVID-19 because of furloughs and so find themselves in a place that they never thought they would be relative to economic instability. And so, yes, that is a problem for the country. I think that I didn't state this, but, when you look at Black businesses, nationally, 40% of Black businesses will not come back as a result of COVID-19. And so, this conversation about the economics, I would, it's really seemed to come forth more within the Hispanic community. Because there's a perception that there'll be a cost of getting the vaccine. And so when you're already strapped financially, there's this fear of like, oh my gosh, well, am I gonna have to pay if I go to, because I don't have insurance. And that was a big issue for undocumented Hispanic population. And so it is going to be upon us to make sure that and just as with COVID testing, I think that was something that was really a strong, that we didn't want to have any barrier to why someone wouldn't take the vaccine. So there's like a different issue. And so I think one of the things that we were charged with is really understanding what the differences are. I think your question about the economics is one that we could probably drill further into. Right now, we really were just asking people, how has your household been impacted versus whether or not the cost and burden of large medical bills being impacting. So that would be like a phase 2 of the research to dig deeper into that economic question. And that's something we definitely would be willing to do. But we at least know within the Hispanic community, the concern about the cost, specifically among undocumented Hispanic populations of this region of the county, was where that concern came forth.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both to Robert and to Renee for joining today and for the very extensive report out. I think it validates some of what we think we know or what we're hearing anecdotally. It's helpful to have the statistics and the reasons for some of the trepidation amongst the Black community and the Hispanic community about the vaccine in general, and what we need to do then to respond to the messaging into these communities. And so thanks, because it will help inform the work as we move forward. It's a challenge. I mean, even with the testing was a challenge because I heard a lot of people say, I don't want my insurance charged. I don't want to have to pay for that. And it was free. And so we clearly needed to do better there. And I think the same thing's going to play out here with the vaccine. So lessons learned are helpful, but the data that you provided is extremely good and extremely helpful. So I just appreciate the work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Renee, I'd like to ask you, as it relates to the resistance between age breakdown, are there older people resisting the vaccine more so than the younger people? I don't know if I didn't memorize the report so far.
It's a mix. It's a mixture. I mean, because I know the assumption would be potentially older people would be yes. It's an equal mix. And I think that mixture, based on both the quantitative and qualitative data, is about the mistrust. And so this notion of changing the mistrust is the baseline, right? And that mistrust comes from different places. It's generational, and it's just like, I'll use as myself as an example, and I guess this is a public thing, but I'll use organ donation as an example. So I'm going to use myself. I, for many years, did not check organ donation because I'd heard a myth that because I'm Black, if I'm in the hospital and I'm like borderline, they may not save me. And I believe that because that was shared with me generationally. So I'm just using that as an analogy. that same thinking process is similar to knowing Tuskegee, knowing Henrietta Lacks, knowing some of the radiation testing and research done just in the 70s, and along with the gynecological experimentation on Black women during slavery. And so so when you know that history, it's those generational stories that cause you to pause, or for someone to say, you might want to, no, maybe you need to think about that. We might need to know a little more. And so that's where, now, there have been significant changes since then, relative to the Belmont report, which protects us in research, right? But again, if you're not familiar with that process, if you don't understand that process, then you don't, so information, and at the end of the day, our job, I think, our job as the Health Gap, our job with all of the organizations that work to serve Black and brown people in this county, is to make sure people have good information to make informed decisions, ultimately save their lives and the lives of their families.
Right, great. And the reason why I asked that question, now we're vaccinating 70 and up. And I'm just wondering, as we lower the age, will the numbers go up in the Black community as relates to taking the vaccination? So we'll find that out.
Right, we will.
Yeah, I want to thank Robert and Renee also. Thank you both.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you. Robert was awesome during this process, and we were working diligently every day for this incredible time frame. But he's like, Renee, can you do it? And I was like, we're going to do it. And so, again, I think what you saw is a collaboration with many organizations that are serving the needs of Black and brown people across our county.
And commissioners, if I can just add lastly that I'm just really excited about this, because again, it's the equity framework. You are providing culturally relevant services, but you're also doing community engagement and grassroots organizing. I'm seeing the potential of this, that the county has with using funds that do these, that bring these kinds of results. And it's amazing, because we didn't start this till early December. And look at what they were able to
signed all the contracts, I think right before Thanksgiving, and so we hit the ground running. So I know our project leads got tired of hearing from me, but because of all of the partnerships and relationships and collaborations with so many individuals and community leaders as well as organizations, that's how we were able to get all of this research done in a short time, and including our partnership with Xavier University, that really help us have this baseline understanding of where the Black and brown community sits relative to the majority population on these issues.
So I would like to see the county do more of this kind of work. That's just my own personal opinion. I think it's important work that we can really put our hands around.
Well, more needs to be done. More needs to be done, no doubt about it. Thank
you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all.
So our next order of business is a resolution. I'm going to hand it over to Vice President Reese to start the discussion.
Thank you, Madam President. In front of us, we have a resolution launching the COVID-19 Economic Recovery and Relief Task Force. Just as we just heard from our last presentation, and I thought that was excellent. A lot of great data, a lot of great input. And there has been some very good work that was done, because no one saw COVID hitting, and it hit. Over $142 million we got to help people. And certainly there was a lot of work to be done in a very short period of time. Unfortunately, most people thought COVID would be over by now. In fact, all the people that, when it came out, they said, oh, by December, it'll be over. Then they said by January, we'll be done with COVID. But COVID continues to stick around, and it has made a huge dent economically, continuously, to people. There's still too many people unemployed, too many people still furloughed, too many people that still need help. And so one of the things with the task force, recovery and relief task force would do three things for us. I think one, put us in a position now with the new administration coming into the White House, that we do have a task force we are ready to go. And if there's additional funds, we're ready to fight for those funds. The task force would focus on the areas of helping residents and businesses. It will focus on looking at ways that we can reduce taxes, looking at ways that we can help our residents get a break, looking at ways in which we can expand on what we've already done to help even more small businesses, to help even more people who are unemployed and people who are still in this stage of struggle. The first phase would be similar to a strike force, as the governor's put together a strike force. It will be an action team, we're calling it, that will be internal with the administration once the board passes what we decide the CARES Act money should go to, or other dollars that may be coming down, how we can better coordinate and collaborate to get the information to as many people as possible, learning from what we've done before, but also improving on those things. It also would consist of looking at things like a portal. Yes, we have a one-stop. You could go to our website right now, but it sends you to multiple places. And Bridget Doherty, along under Jeff's leadership, is looking at now how can we get a portal where you could just one stop on the website and be able to get as much information as you can right there. It also would be looking at other things as navigators to help people with unemployment as well as small businesses, so they have a person that they can talk to. It will be, again, focused on tax and rate relief, job retention, reemployment, food, stabilization, housing, small business relief, infrastructure, transportation, and advocacy at the state and federal level for additional resources to meet the critical needs of Hamilton County residents. That would be first phase, would be internal, so that we could try to get people help right now, because people still need help right now. And then phase two would be an external group that we would appoint. We would come back and look at the different categories that we'd like to see appointed, that would then begin looking at the rebuilding stage. Because once all of this is over, we have to look at how do we now rebuild our county, reopen at 100% capacity, and be able to look at investments for the future. And that would come back to the board for appointments and how that board would look. Well, right now we would be focusing on phase one. So that is the gist of this resolution. I know in January we had already passed in our organization resolution, but this puts a little more in terms of how do we move forward with this idea. So just like to present this and looking forward to moving forward. Jeff's team would be coming back to us in a week or maximum 2 weeks to present to us moving forward as we look at what are we going to do with the CARES Act money that's left over and some of the other initiatives that we talked about.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Dreehouse.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to support this resolution. I think it's a good idea to put into one place all the benefits that are available for folks that live in the county, whether it's through the treasurer's office or the county commission or, the COVID relief dollars. I think it's helpful to have a common space for people to go to try to navigate that. So we're talking a lot about navigation today, but I do think it's challenging for people in the community to get a handle on what's available for them to be helpful. And so I think the more we can do to navigate people, whether it's related to testing or the vaccine or economic development relief or rent assistance, the better, to just help people get a more clear picture of what can be done and how we are trying to help. And on the available dollars still left, after we got that extension last year for the COVID dollars, I too am looking forward to the report. I think, Madam President, we're going to have a conversation on Tuesday at the staff meeting related to those dollars and the recommendation of staff. And so I'm looking forward to that conversation and getting a better understanding as it relates to what the federal government is trying to accomplish, what the state government's trying to accomplish after the governor rolled out his budget yesterday. So now we've got a clearer picture there as well. I think the challenge is that in both cases with the feds and the state, there's a delay until those dollars actually hit the local communities and are available for the kinds of things that we're talking about. And so I guess I'm hopeful that the county dollars, as they did last time, will plug the gap and make sure that we have money available for small businesses as they wait for maybe a larger portion from the federal government or the state government. We are continuing to help them keep the doors open and the lights on so that they continue to remain active in our community and keep the business viable. So I think that's my hope. Haven't seen the report yet. I know it's coming soon. So we'll look forward to that conversation on Tuesday.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it also. Just a couple comments. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge our staff and all the work that they did in less than 9 months. As it was said earlier, we received $142 million in less than, once again, 9 months. We were able to allocate 92% of the money that was given to us. So it left us about 10 to 11 million left over that was unaccounted for, which I'm sure we will be using. And the need was, and I want to also thank our partners who jumped in there to help us to disperse this money and make things work so people could get their resources quickly. The need was for the homeless, small businesses, the arts, the youth, testing and protect, workforce development, mental health assistance, and so much more. The need has not been fulfilled. There's much more need out there. There are many more people that need assistance. Specifically, I want to speak about the resolution that came before us, and I asked for additional time, and I appreciate that the commission had given me that. I did add 5 additional lines into the resolution, which indicated what had been done before, because I'm just a stickler that we need to know what our history is. We need to know what we did to lead up to this place. Every resolution that I've ever written, ever reviewed, ever approved in 28 years always had a historical perspective in the resolution. That being said, it was not included in the resolution. I am not going to complain about that. I just wanted to let the people know that I did add on some additional comments for the resolution that I thought would be good for historical sake. I will support this resolution because people are still in need. People still need to get their needs met. And if we can think of another way, a creative way to allow that to happen, that's what we need to do. And as I think about finally, my favorite book, and I want my fellow commissioners and our constituents to know that whatever comes before me, a resolution, a budget, whatever it is, I will take my time to review that because as the good book says, wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and with all you're getting, get understanding. So I'm just letting the community know that I am not here to hold up anything. I am not here to stop any progress, but I am here to make sure the people that I represent are represented fairly and with integrity. And whenever it comes forth, whatever it is, I will take my time to take a look at it and make sure that it's something I think will be good for the people of Hamilton County. And with that being said, from the floor.
Madam President, I want to thank you for supporting you and Commissioner Driehaus for supporting this resolution. I've had a chance to write a lot of legislation at the city level as the vice mayor of the city, wrote a lot of legislation, especially in health and economics, and vice president of the budget committee. At the state, very difficult, had to write bills In fact, the state moves, as Denise will tell you, moves very fast, even faster than us with 4,000 page budgets. But I'm always open. I look forward to working. I've always worked across the aisles, even with people of different parties that maybe I didn't agree with them on one issue, but worked with them on other issues. And I'm here to certainly do that. One of the things that was important about the resolution was this resolution dealt with 2021 and not 2020. However, it's not to negate that nothing has been done. You all have done a lot of work, and I appreciate the work that you have done. Certainly, I'm looking forward. Maybe we could have it would be great to have on the calendar where they would come in and do a presentation on the CARES Act money and where it actually went, to acknowledge what we've done. And so where we are now is not to say, I wish we didn't need any more help. I wish there was no one that needed to keep their lights on. I wish there was no one who, small businesses going out of business, even though we helped them, and maybe then they might still need help. So my only thing is to move forward in 2021. The challenges are still ahead of us, and each of us brings strengths to this commission. One of the things that I wanted to make sure of, and like you said, the good book, that's what the Bible say, help as many as you can. And I want to be able to move as quickly as possible, because we don't know what the state's going to do or the federal government. They may not do anything else. We may have to move as quickly. So this strike force, even the governor now has a strike force. I mean, he never had that before. So one of the things that we do want to do also is be aggressive to say, hey, we know that we got to compete with 87 other counties. We got to compete with other states, other cities. We're ready to go. We're ready to fight. We're ready to try to get as much as we can. And I look forward to, I was excited to join this commission, and I'm still excited to work together. So I just want to thank you for moving forward with this today. I appreciate that, and thank Commissioner Driehaus as well. And looking forward to continue to roll up my sleeves to get things done. The timetable is not dictated, unfortunately, by us. It's unfortunate the things we don't control, and people need help still, and bills are due. So I just want to thank you all, but not to negate anything that you've done in the past. Is to build on what you've done in the past. And this motion or this resolution strictly deals with 2021 and going forward, not to negate anything that happened prior to it. So thank you for your understanding to make this move forward today. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion from the floor to adopt resolution launching the COVID-19 Economic Recovery and Relief Task Force?
Yes.
Commissioner Reese, if you would actually move for that.
Yes, I move that the resolution launching the COVID-19 Economic Recovery and Relief Task Force. I don't know what number it is. I think it's number 4 on the agenda.
Number 4.
Number 4 on the agenda.
Second.
Commissioner Summer Dumas,
Yes.
Commissioner Reese,
Yes.
Commissioner Driehaus.
Yes.
Thank you. We have nothing further on our agenda, but I will open it up for our commissioners if there is any additional comments. Vice President Reese.
No additional comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Driehaus.
Yeah, given the conversation that we had about the resolution, I think it will be important on Tuesday when we talk about the COVID dollars that have fallen, to the bottom from last year. I think it will be important to level set that. So I don't know if I need to make the request of the administration myself with the support of my colleagues, but Jeff, if we could have an overview of what did happen in 2020 related to those dollars, not in the weeds so much as those large buckets. And I've seen the document before. It's like a 4-page document that does detail where the dollars went. I think that should help inform us about the money that remains, so that, as Commissioner Reese says, either we're initiating something new or building upon what we have done in the past. And so I do think it'll be important to level set that. So I'm hopeful that we can incorporate that into the conversation on Tuesday.
And that request has been made, and I'm sure that'll be inclusive in his report. But Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just say certainly that the report that we'll provide, and actually you should be getting something later on today, will be a summary of the CARES Act plan as it relates to the amount of expenditures and obligations through the end of the year, 12/30 of 2020. The amount of dollars that will be continuing forward through some sort of obligation, as well as the amount of dollars that, as you indicated, Commissioner Dreehouse, had fallen to the bottom that we are recommending for reprogramming. We will have a recommendation as it relates to how to reprogram those dollars based upon what we've seen in some of the conversations in the community. And of course, that's open for board discussion and ultimate approval.
And Jeff, could we also, I know hopefully we'll have a lot of time allotted. I'm very much interested in doing a deep dive, and people should know, who, I know we've got you had a graphic that you had, this much money and 600 business. Who are the businesses? I think that would very much help. Who are the people that got the money? And so I think, certainly we should put the time aside to acknowledge what's been done, who did get help, so that everybody knows these are the folks that actually got the money and got help in terms of businesses, et cetera.
Sure. Well, yeah, we're more than happy to do as in-depth of a presentation on this as the board desires. As you indicated, Vice President Reese, we're talking 800-900 when you throw in the nonprofits, probably up to 1,000 or more individual organizations. So we'll try to think through a concise way to do that. Maybe there's some links that we can provide where we can direct the public for who want to go into more depth on who received dollars. And we'll try to also kind of break them down a little bit so we can provide it, so we can do the deep dive that you're looking for at the same time, be efficient with the time as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that being said, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Commissioner Summer Dumas,
Yes,
Commissioner Reese,
Yes.
Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yes.
thank you.